No one saw the war coming, not even the Watchers of the Stars who had predicted every solar flare and every political shift between the great houses of the Antares system for 1,000 cycles. The skies tore open one evening above the beast plains of Targon 4, and from the rupture poured not missiles or machines, but beasts. Not just ordinary alien beasts, but titanic, snarling creatures born of unknown worlds, their scales smoking with plasma heat, their roars shaking mountain roots. No fleet could tame them. No tranquilizer pierced their hides. The Galactic Peace Union sent warriors, then scientists, then priests. All failed. Cities burned and outposts fell. The only ones who stood between extinction and the stars were the Beastmasters, telepathic alien tamers trained since birth to command even the wildest monstrosities. But even they were breaking. Then, from the outer rim, came a small vessel barely above scrap, piloted by a human named Cade Renner. No one invited him. He came with no weapons, no army, just a journal and a calm voice. When his ship landed near the fallen towers of Urkenthal, the beasts were already circling, their fangs bared and rage thick in the air like smoke. A beastmaster raised her staff to strike, but paused. One of the alpha beasts, a black-scaled titan, known to have crushed hover tanks, froze when Cade spoke. Not with orders, not with threats, but with a single soft word that made even the winds still. The creature's ears twitched. It took a step back, then another. And it sat like a trained hound before Cade with a slow, deep breath that startled every warrior nearby into silence. Asterisk, the war began without warning. No declaration, no broadcast. Just a sudden scream from the sky above Targon 4. Giant space beasts, wild and untamed, erupted from a rift that tore through the atmosphere like a claw ripping flesh. They were unlike anything seen before. Some with glowing eyes, others with armored hides that shimmered under sunlight. The Galactic defense units responded with force, but their bullets and plasma had no effect. The beasts crushed tanks with their tails. They melted bunkers with their breath. People ran. Cities crumbled. Even the air felt afraid. Beastmasters from every corner of the galaxy were summoned. These were alien tamers born with psychic links to the wild, each trained since childhood to control deadly creatures. They arrived wearing ornate robes, horns high, staffs humming with energy. At first, they thought they could win. But the beasts from the rift didn't obey. They didn't listen. Not even to the strongest masters. These monsters were rage in living form. They moved like storms with claws. Every failed attempt left another village in ruins. And then, the Council sent a message across systems, calling for any solution. That message reached Earth too. Cade Renner didn't look like a hero. He was human, no medals, no ship worth stealing. Just a quiet man who worked in alien language research. But he felt something deep in his bones when he heard the story of the beasts. He booked passage on a cargo freighter and landed near the Cum-Dio ruins of Urkenthal, where the beasts were last spotted. Everyone laughed when they saw him. Some told him to leave before he got eaten, but he didn't listen. He just walked, barefoot, into the valley where the smoke still rose from crushed machines. The ground trembled. A beast was coming. The monster was twice the size of a drop ship. Its black scales were cracked with fire beneath. It had 3 eyes, all locked on Cade. Nearby, even the bravest beastmasters backed away. But Cade didn't run. He didn't raise a weapon. He simply knelt down and whispered something. A soft word. Not a command, but a feeling. The beast slowed. It sniffed the air. Its claws scraped the stone. Then, to everyone's shock, it lowered its head like a tame hound and sat before him. The entire valley fell silent. The lead beastmaster, Lady Virexa, watched from above. Her armor shimmered with green light. She had tamed sandcrawlers on Kyler. She had bent sky serpents on Oryx. But never had she seen anything like this. She descended the ridge and approached Cade with narrowed eyes. He looked up at her, calm, hands still resting on his knees. She asked him what trick he used. He replied, "I just listened." That answer offended her. She declared that if he truly believed in taming beasts, he must face the trial of Ellerin, a test that no outsider had survived. The trial meant entering the Maw, dark crater where the oldest and wildest beasts dwelled. No weapons, no tech. Only the bond between soul and creature could protect him. Cade accepted with a nod. No fear, no hesitation. Virexa sneered, thinking he would die within minutes. But she was curious too. Curious how a human with no training could reach the heart of a beast in seconds. Cade stood and followed her, the massive creature still trailing behind him like a loyal pet. Every warrior on the ridge whispered to each other as he passed. Some looked angry, others amazed. When the sun set, the beasts howled. The ground cracked. Virexa stood at the mouth of the crater and turned to Cade. "Inside lies death," she said. Cade looked into the shadows and replied, "Only if I shout." Then he stepped inside without looking back. The air inside the crater felt thick and heavy, like it was pressing down on Cade's skin. Mist clung to the rocks and hissed where it touched the glowing crystals buried deep within the soil. Every sound echoed strangely. Even his breathing bounced off the crater walls in strange patterns. It wasn't just a pit. It was alive with something unseen. Far above, Lady Virexa stood on the ridge with her arms crossed, her glowing beast-fang staff pulsing with quiet power. She watched every step Cade took. She didn't blink. She expected him to break quickly, but he kept moving deeper into the maw, calm and steady. The first beast revealed itself without warning. It came from the shadows like a living storm. 8. Legs slammed down with a crack of thunder. Its back glowed with streaks of silver light. Long fangs clicked in and out of its mouth, dripping green venom onto the rocks. Any normal person would have screamed. Most tamers would have raised a defense sphere. Cade did neither. He stopped. He breathed in through his nose. Then he lowered himself slowly onto one knee and whispered something only the beast could hear. The monster paused. Its fangs stopped clicking. The venom dried. It tilted its massive head. The watching beastmasters gasped when they saw the creature turn and walk away peacefully. Even Virexa narrowed her eyes, unsure what she had just witnessed. Cade moved again, not in a rush, not like prey. Like someone who knew the path was listening. The crater grew darker the farther he went. The ground was hot, the walls shook. Strange glowing insects buzzed overhead. In the distance, a low growl rolled out like thunder. Something massive stirred beneath the rocks. Cade whispered again, but this time it wasn't for a beast. It was for himself. Words that brought him back to earth, to forests, to quiet winds and forgotten rivers. He had never told anyone how he learned to calm creatures. As a boy, he'd wandered into a nature reserve and gotten lost. He'd cried. He'd shouted. Then he heard a deep growl behind him. A huge wolf was watching. Instead of attacking, it sat down. And when young Cade spoke softly to it, the wolf didn't move, didn't growl again. It just listened. That moment changed him forever. He didn't need control. He needed connection. And now, facing creatures not of his world, he did the same thing. He found the stillness. He offered understanding instead of power. And it worked. The second trial came when the earth split open. And a great winged beast crawled out, its body covered in volcanic stone and pulsing veins of light. It screeched, a sound that made the rocks crack. Its wings snapped open, sending a wave of heat across the crater. Cade stood still. The beast roared. He didn't speak this time. He sang, a slow, soft melody with no words, just sound. The creature growled again, but softer. It stepped forward, eyes locked on Cade's, and then, with one final breath, It folded its wings and lay down beside him like a cat curling for sleep, up on the ridge. The silence was sharp. No one spoke. No one even breathed. Varexa's fingers twitched. She was feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Doubt. This human, this untrained outsider, was taming what her people had failed to even understand. But she also saw something else. The beasts weren't submitting out of fear. They were responding to peace. That realization shook her more than any defeat. And deep inside, a question rose that she didn't dare speak yet. Could he be what? The legends called the true listener. Cade moved forward into the final chamber, a hollow cave lined with glowing red roots and ancient carvings in languages older than stars. Here lived the final beast, the Guardian, a creature no one had ever seen and returned to speak of. The last to try was her own brother, Varexa remembered. His bones were never found. Cade looked at the wall and read the old writing softly. The soul that calms rage shall pass unharmed. He stepped forward with slow footsteps as the air grew colder. A shadow moved in the dark. Something vast opened its eyes. The creature's eyes were golden, massive, and filled with depth that made Cade feel like he was being studied from every direction at once. It was the Guardian, the last and greatest beast, the one that killed without hesitation and judged without mercy. Its massive form shifted in the dark. Long antlers scraped the ceiling of the ancient cave. Smoke rose from its nostrils. Each claw was longer than a sword. Cade didn't move. He didn't raise his voice or hands. Instead, he bowed his head slightly and closed his eyes. The Guardian growled, a rumble that made the entire cave tremble. But still, Cade remained still. Outside, the other Beastmasters leaned forward. Some had tears in their eyes. They expected blood. Even Varexa gripped her staff tighter. This was the moment the human would be torn apart. But what they saw instead stunned them. The Guardian stepped closer. It lowered its head. It sniffed. Cade's chest, his neck, his breath. Then it exhaled slowly, a long hot wave of wind that passed through the cavern like a sigh of judgment. Cade opened his eyes and whispered again, not to command, but to invite. He said, "You are not alone." And the Guardian blinked once, then knelt before him. For the first time in generations, the trial was completed, not by force, not by training, but by connection. The cave lit up with blue energy as ancient runes activated on the walls. Varexa gasped. The text burned in glowing lines, translating the forgotten words of the old ones. Peace is the only gate. Fear is the only chain. Cade turned to face the mouth of the cave, and the Guardian followed like a gentle shadow. When they stepped into the light, every warrior on the ridge dropped to one knee, not in submission, but in stunned respect. Varexa descended slowly, her face tight with emotion. She stood before Cade, her staff lowered. The Guardian towered behind him but showed no aggression. She looked into Cade's eyes, searching for something. He gave her nothing but a calm gaze. She asked him, "What are you?" He answered, "I'm human." The simplicity of it struck her harder than a blow. She turned and raised her voice to the crowd, declaring that the trial had been passed, the beasts calmed, and the maw sealed. Once more, but her voice trembled with something new. It wasn't fear. It was belief. That evening, the entire valley of Urkenthal changed. The beasts no longer attacked. They wandered peacefully among the ruins. Some even rested near the camps of the warriors. It was as if a great weight had been lifted from the land. Cade sat beside the fire, staring at the stars, while the Guardian curled near him like a giant hound. Beastmasters approached him, one by one, asking to hear how he did it. He had no magic words, no technique. He told them what he believed. Every creature, no matter how violent, had a reason for its pain. You don't silence pain with power. You quiet it with understanding. Varexa watched from the shadows, arms crossed, heart heavy. She had spent her whole life mastering beasts with strength and skill. She had earned her rank through blood and discipline. Yet a man who had none of that had done what no one could. It stung her pride. But it also opened something else, wonder. She approached him after most had gone to sleep. She sat beside him and asked if he feared the Guardian at any moment. He said yes, but he chose to believe something stronger than fear. Fear is the first voice. But not the only one, he said. Her eyes stayed on the fire, but her voice dropped low. I lost my brother to that beast, she whispered. Cade nodded. Then I'm sorry, he replied. The silence between them was deep, but not cold. It was the kind that came before something important. She asked if he would leave now that the trial was done. He shook his head. There's still more to learn, he said. She looked at him, really looked this time, and saw not a warrior, not a master, but a mirror to what she had forgotten long ago. Cade leaned back and closed his eyes. The Guardian rumbled softly. Virexa stayed beside him as the fire crackled. Somewhere in the distance, a young beast howled not in rage, but in song. The next morning brought changes across the entire valley. The sky was calm. The wind no longer carried the stench of fear. Beasts that had once roared with fury now moved like herds in peace. Warriors who had once stood with weapons ready now walked among the creatures without raising a hand. Children of the survivors played near small horned beasts that used to bite through steel. Cade walked through the valley in silence, nodding gently to each creature that passed him. Some growled softly but moved aside. Others nuzzled his hand like pets. He didn't force them. He just respected them. Virexa stood atop the hill where she had first watched him arrive. She watched the scene unfold below her with a strange weight. In her chest, it felt like relief and sorrow mixed together. For years, she had fought to protect this world using power. Now one man had changed it using nothing but words. She touched her staff, once a symbol of dominance, now feeling heavy. In her hand. Behind her, a group of elders approached. They were the oldest of the Beastmaster Order. Their faces were lined with history. Their eyes carried judgment. But this time, their tone was uncertain. They asked her how a human could pass the ancient trial. She didn't answer right away. One of the elders spoke sharply, saying tradition must not be changed because of one lucky event. Another said it was not luck, but fate. A third suggested testing the human again, publicly, to prove his worth. Virexa turned toward them and spoke quietly. He passed where we all failed. That is not luck. Her voice was calm but firm. The elders exchanged looks. They were not ready to give up their control. She saw it in their eyes. And so did Cade from below. Later that day, the elders approached Cade with ceremonial formality. They spoke of a new challenge. Not just another beast, but the wild packs in the northern mountains. These beasts had never been tamed. They existed outside the known systems of control. No Beastmaster had returned from the mountains. The elders said it was to prove whether Cade's way worked on truly untouchable life. Virexa objected at first, but Cade agreed before she could finish. He smiled. I will go, he said. She looked at him sharply and whispered, They want you to fail. Cade answered, Then I will fail gently. The journey began before the sun had fully risen. Cade traveled with only a pack, a long staff for walking, and the Guardian trailing. Behind him like a silent protector. Virexa rode beside him on her winged beast, though she said little. The mountains ahead rose like blades into the sky, jagged and cold. Storms circled them, and lightning cracked across the peaks. Every story said those mountains belonged to chaos. Yet Cade walked toward them with the same calm he had shown from the start. No fear, only presence. Virexa finally asked, Why do you trust them? He said, Because someone should. As they reached the lower cliffs, signs of the wild. Packs became clear, massive claw marks on stone. bones picked clean but placed in patterns. Howls that carried not rage, but messages. Cade stopped and knelt beside a circle of stones and feathers. He said it was a memory ritual. Virexa watched him carefully. She had never seen anyone read the language of wild beasts. Not even the oldest tamers. Cade said softly, "They mourn here. This is not a hunting ground. This is a grave." She felt her chest tighten. These creatures had culture. They had heart. They had loss. They made camp near the ridge, where the stars seemed closer than the ground. The guardian stood watch while the fire cracked gently. Virexa finally spoke about her past. She told Cade how she had once tried to tame a northern beast. It had killed her best friend in front of her. Since then, she had hated them. Not for what they did, but for making her feel powerless. Cade listened without interrupting. When she finished, he looked at the fire and said, "Then maybe we both came here to heal." That night, the first of the wild ones appeared at the edge of the trees. A tall beast, fur like starlight, eyes glowing green. It didn't growl. It didn't attack. It watched in silence while the firelight danced across its face. The wild beast stood like a silent statue under the stars. Its fur shimmered silver and blue in the moonlight. Its chest rose and fell slowly. Its long claws dug into the dirt, but it didn't move forward. Cade didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't flinch. Instead, he stood and slowly walked toward it. Virexa rose to stop him, but paused when she saw his posture. Calm, grounded. The guardian let out a soft rumble but didn't follow. Cade stood 10 feet away from the creature and sat cross-legged on the ground. He closed his eyes and whispered a soft tune into the night air. The beast tilted its head. Its ears twitched. It didn't roar or attack. It stepped closer, one step at a time. Virexa watched from behind a rock, holding her breath. Every muscle in her body told her to prepare for battle. But something about the way the air felt stopped her. There was no danger, no threat. Just a quiet understanding building between two beings who had never met. The beast sniffed the space between them and lowered its head. Cade slowly opened. His eyes, their gazes met. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then the beast sat down beside him like an old friend. By morning, 5 more of the mountain beasts had appeared. Each one arrived from a different direction. None attacked. They all came with caution and curiosity. Cade greeted each one with the same calm energy. He spoke little, just enough to share peace. Virexa recorded everything with her visor, knowing no council would ever believe it. The pack circled the camp but didn't cross the firelight. Cade explained they were testing boundaries, not out of fear, but respect. He said these creatures were not wild in the way others believed. They were careful. They chose who to show themselves to. That day, Cade found carvings in a cliffside near the edge of the forest. He ran his fingers across the symbols, translating slowly. They were not just markings. They were warnings. The beast's ear had once tried to live near others. But when hunters came, they were forced to fight back. Since then, they stayed hidden. Cade called it history through pain. Virexa walked beside him, silent. She saw the sadness in his face and felt it in herself too. She had spent years fighting creatures she never tried to understand. She whispered, "We never listened to them." Cade nodded. As night fell again, the largest beast of the pack emerged from the shadows. Its body was black with a stripe of crimson across its spine. Its horns curled like ancient roots. This was the Alpha, the leader. It approached with slow steps and stood before Cade, towering like a mountain. Cade bowed his head and placed his hand over his heart. The Alpha leaned forward. Their foreheads touched for only a moment. Then the Alpha stepped back and let out a deep howl. Not a call for war, but a call for unity. One by one, the other beasts howled too. That sound traveled far. It echoed across the cliffs and valleys. Even the elders back at the Central Council heard it. They didn't understand it, but they felt it. Something had changed. Something ancient had returned. The bond between beast and soul, between heart and silence. The sound even reached nearby villages where people stepped outside in wonder. Children listened and smiled. Warriors laid down their weapons. Something inside them responded to the harmony of it. Something deep and old and forgotten. Virexa looked at Cade, unsure if she was still the same person she had been a week ago. He had not just tamed beasts. He had changed the entire rhythm of a world. She asked him if this was his goal from the start. He said no. I only wanted to help one voice be heard, he answered. She asked, whose voice? Cade looked toward the sky and said, all of them. For the first time, she understood that his mission was never about power. It was about listening to the pain no one dared to hear. That night, as the stars blinked overhead and the mountains stood quiet, the beasts lay near the camp like guardians of an old truth. Cade sat with his back to a tree. Virexa sat beside him. No words were needed now. The next day brought unexpected visitors to the mountain camp. A group of warriors arrived, sent by the council. They rode armored transports and carried weapons charged with stun energy. The moment they saw the beasts, they drew their rifles. Virexa stood between them and the pack, her voice sharp. She ordered them to lower their weapons. The commander refused, claiming they had orders to secure the area. Cade stepped forward and said nothing. He simply walked toward the beasts and sat among them. The beasts didn't react with fear or aggression. They surrounded him calmly, as if protecting their own. The commander watched with disbelief. He muttered something about sorcery and false peace. Virexa confronted him and told him the truth. She explained everything Cade had done. She described the trial of Ellerin, the calming of the Guardian, and the acceptance of the wild packs. But the commander didn't care about balance or harmony. He had come to restore control. Control meant fear. Control meant power. Cade stood and faced him with no anger, only disappointment. You came with answers no one asked for, he said. The commander laughed and raised his rifle. That was his mistake. Before he could fire, the alpha beast let out a thunderous roar. It didn't attack. It didn't charge. It simply roared so loud that the rock shook. The other beasts followed with their own howls. The ground trembled under the pressure. The commander dropped to one knee, stunned. His men fell back in panic. The Guardian emerged from the shadows behind the ridge, its golden eyes glowing. It stared at the intruders without blinking. The warriors lowered their rifles. They were not trained for this. They were not ready to face peace that defended itself. Virexa stepped between the beasts and the soldiers. She raised her staff not to command but to calm. Her voice was no longer that of a war leader. It was that of a protector. No one needs to die here, she said. Cade nodded and called the beasts back with a soft gesture. Slowly, they stepped away, their bodies still tense. The commander breathed heavily and stood. His voice was shaky. What are you people doing out here? Cade looked at him and said, changing everything. The soldiers didn't argue anymore. They packed their gear and retreated down the slope without looking back. That night, Virexa sat with Cade and stared into the fire. She confessed she once believed that strength came only from control. That order could only be achieved through obedience. But now she saw that trust could lead where control never could. Cade smiled and said, we were taught to fear what we didn't understand. She nodded slowly. The Guardian lay beside them, eyes half closed. The mountain pack rested in the trees. There was no cage, no command chain, just connection. Just choice. That was something no one could fake. It had to be real. Far away, the council met in secret chambers. Some wanted to punish Virexa for defying tradition. Others feared what Cade represented. A few saw opportunity, a new way. A rare voice said, If he can tame the untamable, maybe he can teach us to understand. But power fears change. And so they sent a message in secret to a mercenary faction. A warning, a price. They labeled Cade a threat to order. A silent target marked for elimination. Not even Virexa knew of the shadow moving now toward the mountains. The next day began with light rain and soft wind. Cade wandered alone near the base of a cliff, tracing symbols into the mud. The Alpha walked beside him. Suddenly the wind changed. The birds stopped singing. The Guardian raised its head sharply. Virexa stood from her camp and reached for her blade. From the trees came silent shapes in black armor, their faces hidden by mirrored masks. They moved like shadows. They raised their weapons without a word. Virexa shouted, but the blasts had already begun. Cade turned and saw the first bolt coming. The Alpha leaped in front of him and took the hit. It stumbled back, snarling. More blasts fired. The Guardian roared and charged. Beasts scattered into defense. The air filled with chaos. Cade didn't run. He moved toward the Alpha and dropped to his knees. He whispered into its ear. The beast breathed slowly, still alive. The other beasts encircled the humans. Virexa fought with fury, her staff spinning. Like lightning. The assassins fell back, not ready for such resistance. They didn't understand they had attacked a bond stronger than armor. The battle was not like those of the old wars. It was not waged for territory or glory. It was a fight between old fear and new understanding. The assassins had expected beasts to run and scatter. Instead, they faced coordination. The Guardian blocked their advance. The mountain pack flanked their edges. Virexa led the charge, not commanding but guiding. Her voice was steady and calm. Cade stayed low, tending to the injured Alpha, whispering words of peace even as chaos unfolded around. He would not lift a weapon. His strength came from something deeper. The assassins retreated, leaving behind broken gear and stunned silence. They had come for blood. They left defeated by unity. Not a single beast had been killed. Not a single human had died. Cade stood and touched the Alpha's side. The beast rose slowly, scarred but alive. Virexa approached him, her armor scratched and glowing. She looked him in the eye and asked, "Why didn't you run?" He answered, "Because they were not just trying to kill me. They were trying to silence what I stand for." She said nothing more. She understood completely. News spread faster than fire. Videos recorded by Virexa and others reached distant systems. Images of humans standing beside beasts. Footage of monsters lying gently beside children. Even voices from the council chambers were caught in recordings, messages showing betrayal, secrecy, and fear. The people spoke next. Thousands gathered across planets demanding change. Beastmasters began stepping forward to support Cade's method. They called it the way of listening. It was not a religion, not a system. It was a reminder that even the fiercest voice deserves to be heard. The council tried to deny everything. They called it manipulation. They claimed the recordings were false. But their power had already begun to crumble. Virexa stood before them days later, dressed not in battle robes but in plain cloth. Cade stood beside her. Behind them were beasts from 3 worlds. Not chained, not forced, just present. Silent witnesses to truth. She spoke to the room filled with trembling rulers and said, "If you must rule, let it be through trust." Cade added, "And if you must lead, lead by listening." That was all they said. The rest was decided by the people. In the following months, training centers changed. No longer did Beastmasters begin with commands and collars. They began with patience, with time, with calm. Cade visited each one he could. He never gave long speeches. He sat among students and answered their questions. Sometimes he just listened. His presence alone reminded them that peace was not weakness. It was strength controlled. The guardian traveled with him, always quiet, always watchful. The mountain alpha healed and returned to its pack, but it still howled at night in his name. Virexa stayed by Cade's side, not as a guard, but as a partner. She trained new masters in the way of listening. She wrote the first texts about empathy-based connection. At night, she and Cade would sit by the fire again, just as they had on the mountain. There were no more words of battle. No more talk of pain, just soft music from old instruments. And the quiet sounds of beasts resting nearby. Once, she asked Cade if he ever imagined this when he first stepped off his ship. He smiled and said, "I imagined a voice. I didn't know it would become a chorus." The galaxy changed in small steps. Not every world welcomed the new way. Some still clung to fear, but wherever Cade went, the seeds of change were planted. And when those seeds took root, the creatures changed too. Beasts stopped running. They started watching. They waited to see if the one approaching came with fear or understanding. Many humans, inspired by Cade, started to walk calmly, slowly, and when they did, the beasts allowed them to get closer. Years later, a statue was raised in the valley of Urkenthal. It showed a human sitting cross-legged with a great beast beside him. The inscription read, "He spoke softly, and the wild listened." Cade stood beside the statue and said nothing. Virexa placed her hand on his shoulder. Around them, children played, and the creatures that once destroyed cities now curled beside them like protectors of a forgotten truth.